In an elite hospital, a woman goes into labor surrounded by promises of care and safety. But someone among the staff hides a dark plan and is about to strike at the patient's most vulnerable moment. No one expected that a forgotten camera in the corner of the room would record everything. The house in Denver, Colorado was silent that May afternoon, with the autumn sun tinting the white walls a golden hue. Mrs. Adelaide watched the bustling streets of Cherry Creek from the bus window, her heart tightening with emotion. After so many years living alone in a rented apartment in Capitol Hill, she was finally on her way to her son's house. Raphael had insisted so much, promised so much, that she could no longer refuse. At 73, she felt the weariness in her bones and the loneliness that grew each day. The idea of having company, of being close, to her only son, seemed like a gift that life was finally granting her. Raphael was waiting at the door when the taxi pulled up. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a wide smile, he had his late grandmother's eyes and the determined manner of his father, whom Adelaide had barely known. A widow at 26, she had raised the boy alone, sewing for others, baking cakes to order, and cleaning houses on weekends. Every penny she earned was invested in her son's future. Raphael studied in public school, worked from an early age as an office boy, and never gave up. He graduated in business administration by attending college at night, and at 42, he was a regional manager for a large technology company. "Adelaide," Raphael said, hugging her tightly, holding the old suitcases she had insisted on bringing. "You can't imagine how happy I am. The house is too big for just the two of us. You're going to love living here." The two of us, she thought, but said nothing. She knew there was someone else. Raphael had married Livia 6 months earlier, a woman Adelaide had only met at the ceremony, a small, elegant party in a hall, in Highlands Ranch. Livia had worn a white lace dress, her blonde hair impeccably pulled back in a low bun, soft makeup that highlighted her light eyes. Adelaide remembered finding her daughter-in-law beautiful, polite, perhaps a little distant. But Raphael seemed so in love that she pushed aside any concerns. The house was truly impressive. 3 stories, a well-kept garden, a backyard pool, and decor that looked straight out of a magazine. Livia appeared at the door with a wide smile, extending her arms. "Mrs. Adelaide, what a joy to have you here," she said in a melodious voice. "Raphael hasn't stopped talking about your arrival. I've prepared your room on the 2nd floor with a view of the garden. I hope you like it." Adelaide felt a warmth in her chest. Perhaps she had misjudged her daughter-in-law. The woman seemed genuinely happy about her presence. She climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of age in her knees, and upon entering the room she could hardly believe it. It was spacious, bright, with new furniture and a queen-size bed covered with a beige comforter. There was even a small stereo system on the dresser. "I brought this so you can listen to your music," Livia said, entering behind her. "Raphael mentioned you love the radio." Adelaide felt her eyes well up. How long had it been since she felt so welcome? "Thank you, my dear," she managed to say. "You and Raphael are very good to me." Livia smiled and left the room, leaving Adelaide alone to unpack her things. As she unwrapped her old clothes, the few belongings she had brought, she allowed herself to dream. Perhaps these would be the best years she had left. Living with her son, helping with household chores, cooking the recipes Raphael had loved so much as a child. Being a grandmother someday, who knew? Life finally seemed to be giving her back a little of what she had always given. The first few days were perfect. Livia woke up early, prepared coffee with cakes and fruit, sat at the table with Adelaide and Raphael, and chatted about pleasantries. She asked about Adelaide's past, feigned interest in old stories, and praised the strength her mother-in-law had shown in raising her son alone. Raphael looked at the two women with evident pride, as if he had managed to unite the two most important parts of his life. Adelaide helped in the kitchen, always asking permission before touching anything. Livia said there was no need, that the house was hers too, but the elderly woman still felt like a guest. Gradually, she began to relax. She started making the cakes Raphael adored, arranged the garden flowers in the morning, and chatted with Marina, the housekeeper who worked in the house 3 times a week. Marina was a woman of about 50, black, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. and a wary gaze. She had worked for Livia for 4 years since before the marriage. Adelaide tried to strike up a conversation, but Marina was sparing with her words, almost as if she was afraid of saying something wrong. "Are you enjoying it here, Mrs. Adelaide?" she asked one day, while ironing in the utility room. "Yes, I am," Adelaide replied, smiling. "My son and Livia are very thoughtful. I'm feeling at home." Marina merely nodded and continued ironing, but Adelaide sensed a tension in the air that she couldn't identify. She attributed it to the housekeeper's reserved manner and thought no more of it. It was in the 3rd week that things began to change, subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Livia started making small comments about the radio being too loud. Adelaide lowered the volume, apologizing. Then Livia suggested it would be better not to use the stove when she wasn't home, as Adelaide might forget the burner on. Adelaide felt offended but said nothing. She had cooked her whole life. She had never forgotten a pot on the stove. Raphael started traveling more for work. 1 week in New York City, another in Washington, D.C., then in Miami. He always apologized to his mother, saying he would be back soon, that it was just a phase. Livia stayed at home, and when Raphael left, something in the air changed. Adelaide noticed it for the first time when she wanted to lock her bedroom door to change clothes. The lock didn't work. She called Livia, who came quickly, a smile still on her face. "Oh, Mrs. Adelaide, that lock has been problematic for ages. I forgot to call the locksmith. But don't worry, no one will enter your room." "But I would like to have privacy," Adelaide insisted, feeling uncomfortable. Livia laughed, a high-pitched sound that echoed in the hallway. "Privacy? We're family, you don't need that. Besides, what if you feel unwell and I need to get in? It's safer this way." Adelaide didn't know what to say. Livia's words made sense, but something about them deeply bothered her. In the following days, she tried to get dressed in the bathroom, but Livia always seemed to appear at the most inopportune moments, opening the bedroom door without knocking, entering as if the space belonged to no one else. The radio also became a problem. Livia began to say that the old music gave her a headache, that she preferred the silence of the house. Adelaide started listening only with headphones, but then Livia said that was dangerous, that she might not hear if someone called her. The solution, according to her daughter-in-law, was simply to stop listening. Adelaide felt increasingly suffocated, but when Raphael returned from his trips, everything seemed normal. Livia was attentive, affectionate, made a point of preparing the dinners he liked, asking about his mother, showing concern. Raphael saw nothing wrong. How could he? His wife was perfect. One day Adelaide wanted to make the cornmeal cake her son loved. She went down to the kitchen early, in the morning when Livia was still asleep. She separated the ingredients, turned on the oven, and began to lovingly mix everything. She was humming softly when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Livia entered the kitchen in a bathrobe, hair loose, her expression grim. "What are you doing?" she asked in a cold voice. "I'm making a cake for Raphael," Adelaide replied, trying to smile. "He always loved it so much." "I've already said I prefer to do things my way in this kitchen," Livia said, approaching. "You might hurt yourself, you might ruin my utensils. It's better to leave it to me." "But I've always cooked," Adelaide protested, feeling her throat tighten. "I won't ruin anything." Livia didn't reply. She simply took the bowl from the elderly woman's hands and put everything in the sink. Adelaide stood still, unreacting, watching her work being discarded. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was shaky. "Why did you do that?" "Because this is my house," Livia said, turning to face her. "And here, things work my way. You're here because Raphael insisted, but I won't allow you to mess up my routine. Is that clear?" Adelaide felt her legs weaken. That wasn't the same sweet woman from the first few days. That was a stranger, someone who looked at her with poorly disguised contempt. She went up to her room without saying another word, locked herself in the bathroom, and cried in silence. When she looked in the mirror, she saw an old, frightened, lost woman. What was happening? The following weeks were a silent nightmare. Adelaide woke up every day, hoping things would improve, but each dawn the situation became more oppressive. Livia had established a rigid routine that the elderly woman was to follow without question. A Time to wake up, to shower, to go downstairs for coffee. No staying in the room all day, as Livia would say in a tone of false concern when Raphael was present. It's important to keep your mind active, Mrs. Adelaide. Isolation isn't good for anyone. But when Raphael left for work, Livia's mask fell. The orders came in a dry, cutting tone. Adelaide was supposed to help tidy the house, but not in the way she knew how. Livia corrected everything, undid her mother-in-law's work in front of her, sighed loudly as if dealing with an incompetent child. Glasses had to be aligned in a certain way in the cabinet. Towels folded into 3 parts, not 4. The floor mop always moved from left to right, never the other way around. Adelaide tried to get it right, struggling to memorize all those absurd rules, but there was always something wrong, and with each mistake Livia would explode, not with shouts or scandals that could be heard, but with that icy tone, that look of contempt that cut deeper than any scream. "You can't do anything right, can you?" Livia would say, holding Adelaide's arm with unnecessary force to show where she had erred. "Look here, do you see? Stained. You'll have to wash everything again." The marks began to appear, small bruises on her arms, where Livia's fingers dug in as she pulled her mother-in-law from one side to another. Adelaide tried to hide them with long-sleeved blouses, even in Denver's heat. When Raphael asked why she was so bundled up, she made excuses. She was feeling cold, age made her circulation poor, things like that. Raphael believed her, always believed her. He saw his attentive wife, the woman who prepared teas for his mother, who suggested walks in, the park, who commented with concern about Mrs. Adelaide's forgetfulness. Yes, because Livia had started a subtle and effective campaign to plant in her husband's mind that his mother-in-law was losing her mental faculties. "Raphael, have you noticed your mother has been very confused lately?" she'd say during dinner with an expression of sincere concern. "Confused how, Livia?" he would ask, looking at his mother, who ate in silence. Yesterday she forgot she had already eaten lunch and wanted to eat again. The other day she looked for her glasses for an hour, and they were on her head. And she's been very quiet, you know. I worry. Adelaide felt her blood boil. None of it was true. Her glasses had disappeared because Livia had hidden them, she was sure, and she had never tried to eat lunch twice. They were lies, all lies, but how to prove it? Raphael looked at her with that expression of pity and concern that hurt more than any physical aggression. "Mum, are you feeling well? Do you want me to make a doctor's appointment?" "I'm fine, Raphael," Adelaide would say, her voice weaker than she wished. "No need to worry." But the seed was planted, and Livia was skilled at watering it. Subtle comments always in front of Raphael, observations about forgetfulness that had never happened, invented stories about confusions Adelaide supposedly had during the day. Her son began to look at his mother with that mixture of love and concern that she knew well. It was the same look she had had for her own mother in her last years of life. Marina saw everything. The housekeeper was a silent witness to what was happening in that house. She arrived 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always at 8 in the morning. She found Mrs. Adelaide in the kitchen, having coffee alone, her gaze distant, new marks on her arms that she tried to hide. Marina cleaned, ironed, tidied, and while doing her work, she observed. She saw how Livia changed completely when her husband was home. Her voice became sweet, her gestures gentle, her concern for her mother-in-law seemed genuine. But when Raphael left, the venom returned. The harsh orders, the tugs, the humiliations disguised as corrections. Marina wanted to speak, wanted to report, but she was afraid. Livia was her employer, paid her salary, and jobs were not easy to find. Besides, who would believe her against such a socially respected woman? One day, while ironing in the utility room, Marina heard an argument coming from the kitchen. She approached silently and saw Livia holding Adelaide's arm tightly, twisting the thin, wrinkled skin. "I already told you not to touch my things," Livia hissed. "How many times do I have to repeat myself? Is it so hard to understand?" "I was just arranging the flowers," Adelaide whimpered. "The vase was crooked." "I don't care. You don't touch anything without my permission. Nothing, understood?" Marina saw the purple mark form on Mrs. Adelaide's arm even before Livia let go. She felt anger rising, but fear was stronger. She went back to the utility room and pretended not to have seen anything. But guilt began to gnaw from within. Adelaide was getting thinner and thinner. Livia controlled what she ate, always with plausible excuses. "Mrs. Adelaide, the doctor said you need to control your cholesterol. No fried food." "Mrs. Adelaide, diabetes is serious. Less sugar." The portions got smaller, the meals blander. The elderly woman ate in silence without complaining, because complaining only made things worse. At night, locked. In the bathroom, since the bedroom door wouldn't close, Adelaide cried softly. She thought about leaving, about going back to her old apartment, but she had nowhere to go. She had given up the lease when she came to live with her son. Thinking about telling Raphael the truth seemed impossible. He loved Livia, believed in her blindly. How could she explain without appearing to be a problematic, envious, lying mother-in-law? Livia had built that image of a perfect wife and confused mother-in-law so well that any accusation would sound like delusion. The worst moment came on an August afternoon. Raphael had been traveling for a week and wouldn't be back anytime soon. Adelaide went downstairs for water and found Livia in the living room, drinking wine and watching television. She tried to pass unnoticed, but her daughter-in-law called her. "Mrs. Adelaide, come here, I need to talk to you." Adelaide approached with her heart pounding. Livia pointed to the sofa with the wine glass in her hand, her gaze intoxicated with power. "Sit down. Let's have a little woman-to-woman chat." The elderly woman sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. Livia took another sip, savoring the moment. "You know, Mrs. Adelaide, I married Raphael because he's successful, handsome, has a future. But you came with the package, and that deeply bothers me." Adelaide felt tears burn in her eyes, but didn't let them fall. Livia continued, her voice slurred by wine and hatred. "You are dead weight in this house, a useless old woman who serves no purpose. Raphael pities you, but I don't. I tolerate you because I have no choice, but if it were up to me, you'd be in some forgotten nursing home." The words were like punches. Adelaide wanted to scream, wanted to defend herself, but her voice wouldn't come out. She stood there petrified, listening to every drop of venom Livia distilled. "And there's no point telling my husband anything. He won't believe you. Everyone thinks I'm perfect, that I take such good care of my mother-in-law. If you open your mouth, I'll say you're having delusions, that senility has set in. Who will they believe? Me, young, beautiful, balanced? Or you, old, confused, dependent?" Livia finished her wine and stood up, leaving Adelaide alone in the living room. The elderly woman stayed there for hours, motionless, feeling the world collapse around her. When she finally managed to move, she went up to her room and lay on the bed, still dressed. She didn't cry. She had no more tears, just an immense void where there had once been hope. That night, Marina arrived home late after doing extra work at another residence. She lived in a small apartment in 5 Points, supporting 2 teenage children alone since her husband had abandoned her. As she prepared dinner, she couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Adelaide. The marks, the faded gaze, the frightened manner. She thought of her own mother, who was also elderly and depended on her. How would she feel if someone treated her that way? Guilt kept her from sleeping. She tossed and turned for hours, listening to the sound of cars on the street, the distant bark of a dog. At 3 in the morning, she made a decision. She could no longer remain silent, but she also couldn't confront Livia directly, as she would lose her job, and her family depended on that income. She needed another way to act, something that would alert Dr. Raphael without directly exposing her. The next morning, while cleaning Raphael's office, Marina had an idea. She saw a stack of papers on the desk, work documents he usually reviewed. With trembling hands, she took a blank piece of paper and a pen. She wrote quickly in disguised handwriting, different from her own. She folded the note and placed it among the documents in a place where he would certainly find it. The note simply said, "If something ever happens, look closely at your mother's arms." Marina put away the pen, finished cleaning the office, and left with her heart pounding. She had done what she could. Now all that remained was to wait and hope that it would be enough to open her employer's eyes before it was too late. Raphael returned from his trip on a rainy Thursday. October had arrived, bringing the first spring rains, and Denver was grey and melancholic. He entered the house carrying his suitcase and the fatigue of an intense week of meetings in Chicago. Livia greeted him with a warm kiss and her usual perfect smile. "Darling, I missed you," she said, helping him with his suitcase. "I've prepared your favorite dish for dinner. Stroganoff, just the way you like it." Raphael smiled, but something in him was different. Perhaps it was the fatigue of the trip, perhaps it was an intuition that was beginning to awaken after months of slumber. He looked around. "Where's my mother?" "She's in her room," Livia replied naturally. "She's been very tired lately. I think we should take her to the doctor, Raphael. I'm worried about her." He nodded, but didn't go upstairs immediately. He needed to shower, change clothes, organize some work things. He went to his office and turned on the computer. While waiting for it to boot up, he began to organize the papers on his desk. That's when he saw the note, a piece of white paper folded in half with handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it and read the short, direct, disturbing words. "If something ever happens, look closely at your mother's arms." Raphael's heart raced. He read it again, trying to understand. Who had written that? What did it mean? He looked at the office door, making sure he was alone, and reread it for the third time. The words echoed in his mind like a silent alarm. His mother's arms. Why her arms? He put the note in his pocket and stood there thinking. He recalled the last few weeks, the quick visits between trips, the family dinners where his mother ate in silence. She really was thinner, quieter. Livia always had an explanation. Age, fatigue, adapting to the new house. He had accepted everything without questioning, trusting his wife, believing she took good care of his mother. But what if it wasn't true? The idea was absurd. Livia was attentive, affectionate, always concerned. But then why would someone leave that note? And why specifically about his mother's arms? During dinner, Raphael observed, Adelaide was sitting at the table eating slowly, wearing a long-sleeved blouse despite the heat that still persisted even with the rain. Livia served, commented on the day, asked about his trip. Everything seemed normal, but something bothered Raphael. The way his mother avoided his gaze, how she ate mechanically, how she seemed to be there only in body, her mind elsewhere. "Mum, are you feeling well?" he asked, interrupting a story Livia was telling. Adelaide looked up, startled. "Yes, son." "Why?" "You're very quiet, and you've lost weight, haven't you?" "It's just her age, Raphael," Livia quickly interjected. "I've already talked to her about it. Her appetite just decreases. But I'm taking care of her diet, don't worry." Adelaide lowered her eyes back to her plate. Raphael felt that discomfort grow. After dinner, when Livia went to the kitchen, he approached his mother. "Mum, can I talk to you in the office?" Adelaide seemed startled. "Of course, son. Did something happen?" "I just want to talk. It's been a while since we had a real conversation." They went upstairs together. Raphael closed the office door and asked his mother to sit down. She obeyed, hands in her lap, posture tense. He pulled up a chair and sat facing her. "Mum, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you happy here?" Adelaide felt her throat tighten. This was the chance she had been waiting for, the opportunity to tell everything. But the fear was greater. What Livia had said echoed in her mind. "No one will believe you. They'll think you're having delusions." "Yes, I am," she lied, forcing a smile. "You two are very good to me." "Then why are you so different? Why have you lost so much weight? Why are you so quiet?" "It's just my age, son. No need to worry." Raphael studied his mother's face, looking for signs of a lie, but she was good at hiding. She had done it her whole life, hidden difficulties, sacrifices, pains, all so as not to worry him. He sighed, feeling helpless. "All right, but if there's anything at all, you tell me. Promise?" "I promise," she lied again. But when she stood up to leave, her blouse sleeve rode up a little, and Raphael saw it. A purple bruise on her wrist, dark, recent. His blood ran cold. "Mom, what is that?" Adelaide quickly pulled down her sleeve, covering the mark. "Nothing, son. I accidentally bumped myself." "Let me see." "No need. It's already better." But Raphael had already stood up and gently held his mother's arm. He slowly pulled up the sleeve, and what he saw made him stagger. It wasn't just one mark. There were several, bruises in different stages, some already yellowish, others still purplish, others red and fresh, as if someone had held her tightly, pulled her, hurt her repeatedly. "Mum, how did you get hurt like this?" Adelaide began to cry, silent tears that flowed without a sound, only her body trembling. Raphael felt the world collapse. The note. That damned note made sense now. Someone had tried to warn him, and he, blind, too trusting, had noticed nothing. "Mum, please tell me what's happening. Who did this to you?" But before Adelaide could answer, the door opened. Livia entered with a tea tray, a smile on her face. "I brought you some tea. It's such a cold night with this rain." She saw her mother-in-law's exposed arm, the evident marks, Raphael's horrified expression. For a second her mask fell. Her gaze was pure hatred, icy, before... She quickly recomposed herself. "Oh, Mrs. Adelaide, haven't those spots gone away yet?" she said in a worried, theatrical voice. "I told you to be more careful. You're always bumping into things, forgetting where you put your hands. It's just old age." Raphael looked at his wife and for the first time truly looked. He saw beyond the beauty, beyond the sweet words, beyond the perfect facade. He saw something cold, calculating, cruel. The note was right. Something was very wrong here. "Livia, can you leave the tea and excuse us?" he said, his voice controlled but firm. "But darling, please, I need to talk to my mother alone." Livia hesitated, realizing she was losing control of the situation. She placed the tray on the table and left, closing the door harder than necessary. Raphael heard her quick footsteps descending the stairs and turned his attention back to his mother. "Now tell me everything from the beginning, and don't spare me any details." Adelaide looked at her son. She saw in his face the same determination he had as a child when he promised to solve the world's problems. But she also saw love, genuine concern, and finally allowed herself to speak. The words tumbled out, interrupted by sobs. She told him about the change in Livia's behavior, about the absurd rules, about the tugs, the threats, the humiliations. She told him about the food control, about the radio ban, about the door that wouldn't lock. She told him about the night Livia called her a useless old woman and threatened her with a nursing home. Raphael listened to everything with a breaking heart. How had he not noticed? How had he let that happen under his own roof? The guilt was overwhelming, but the anger was greater. Anger at Livia, anger at himself, anger at having been so blind. When Adelaide finished, he hugged her. A tight, desperate hug, as if he wanted to protect her from everything that had already happened. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry I didn't see, but it's over. It ends today." She cried on her son's shoulder, feeling a bit of security for the first time in months. Raphael was there, finally knew the truth, and maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But downstairs, Livia paced back and forth in the living room, nervous. She knew she had made a mistake. She had left the marks too visible, hadn't foreseen that someone might alert Raphael. She needed to act fast, regain control before it was too late. She thought of several strategies, of how to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She still had cards up her sleeve. Raphael loved her, trusted her. She just needed to play her hand well, and she could still reverse everything. But there was something Livia didn't know. Raphael had changed that night. The blindfold had fallen. And when a son finally sees his mother's suffering, no manipulation can hold back his determination to protect her. The war was just beginning, but now the sides were clearly defined, and Livia didn't know she was already losing. Dawn arrived without Raphael being able to sleep. He stayed in the office with his mother until late, listening to every detail, every humiliation, every moment of fear she had lived through in those months. The more he listened, the more anger grew within him. How had he been so naive? How had he so easily believed Livia's lies? When Adelaide finally went upstairs to sleep, exhausted from crying and talking, Raphael was left alone in the darkness of the office. He thought about waking Livia immediately, confronting her right there, but he knew he needed to be strategic. If he acted on impulse, she could manipulate the situation, invent excuses, play the victim. He needed proof, witnesses, something concrete. That's when he thought of Marina. The housekeeper worked in the house 3 times a week, was always present, saw everything. Could she have been the one who left the note? It made sense. Marina had access to the office, knew the house's routine, and had always been an observant woman, silent but attentive. He decided he would talk to her next Monday when she returned to work. Until then, he needed to keep up appearances, act normally, observe Livia without her noticing. It would be difficult to look at that woman and pretend nothing had changed, but it was necessary. For his mother, for justice, for everything. Livia came down for breakfast with her usual smile, but Raphael noticed the tension in her eyes. She knew something was different, that he had seen the marks, talked at length with his mother-in-law. She needed to regain lost ground. "Good morning, darling," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "Did you sleep well?" "More or less," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "And you?" "Not much either. I was worried about yesterday's conversation. Is your mother all right?" "She's still resting." Livia prepared coffee in silence, carefully choosing her next words. She sat next to her husband and gently took his hand. "Raphael, I need to talk to you about your mother. I know you saw the marks yesterday and were worried. I am too. The truth is she's been very confused, bumping into things, tripping. Just yesterday she fell in the bathroom. I tried to help her up and she struggled. Got those marks where I held her. I think we're reaching the point where she needs specialized care." Raphael clenched his jaw, controlling his anger. The lie was so blatant, so well constructed, that if he didn't know the truth, he might believe it. Livia was good at this, manipulating, distorting, creating alternative realities that only benefited her. "I'll think about it," he said simply, releasing his hand. Livia noticed the coldness in his gesture and felt a shiver of fear. She needed to act fast. That afternoon, when Raphael left to take care of some things at the bank, she went up to Adelaide's room. The elderly woman was sitting on the bed looking out the window when her daughter-in-law entered without knocking. "So you told him everything, didn't you?" Livia said in an icy voice. Adelaide turned, startled. Livia closed the door and approached slowly, like a predator circling its prey. "Did you think that would solve anything? Did you think he would believe you? Don't be naive, Mrs. Adelaide. I have Raphael in the palm of my hand. All I need to do is cry a little, say you're slandering me because you never accepted me. And he'll believe me." "He saw the marks," Adelaide managed to say, trying to sound brave. "Marks you made yourself, didn't you? Bumping into things, tripping, because you're becoming senile. That's what I'll say. And you know it works, because I've planted that idea in his head months ago." Livia picked up the heel she was wearing and held it tightly, pointing it at her mother-in-law. Adelaide recoiled, backing against the wall, her heart pounding. "If you open your mouth again, if you try to expose me, you'll regret it. I'll make your life such a hell that you'll beg to. Leave. Understood?" At that moment, the door burst open. Raphael stood there, eyes wide, witnessing everything. He had returned early on purpose, suspecting Livia would try something, and now he had the proof he needed. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low but laden with contained fury. Livia turned quickly, hiding the heel behind her back, trying to recompose her expression. "Darling, you're home early. I was just threatening my mother, holding a heel like a weapon." "It's not what it looks like, Raphael. She started accusing me of absurd things and I—" "Enough, Livia. I heard everything. I was outside the door. I heard you threaten her. I heard you admit you planted ideas in my head. I heard everything." Livia's face paled. She realized she had lost, that the game was over. But she wasn't willing to accept defeat so easily. "You don't understand, Raphael. She provokes me all the time, makes a point of messing everything up, challenging me. I just lost my patience. Anyone would. Anyone would assault a defenseless elderly woman, Anyone would leave marks on their own mother-in-law's arms. Anyone would humiliate and threaten someone who just wants to live in peace. Livia tried to approach, but Raphael raised his hand, stopping her. He went to his mother, who was leaning against the wall, trembling, and hugged her protectively. "It's over, Livia. I want you to pack your things and leave my house, now." "This house is mine too," Livia retorted, showing her claws. "I'm your wife. You can't just kick me out like this." "I can and I will, and if you resist, I'll call the authorities and report everything you did to my mother. Assault, threats, psychological torture, choose." Livia looked at her husband and saw that he was serious. There was no more room for manipulation, for false tears, for anything. She had completely lost control. Anger exploded. "You'll regret this, Raphael. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone your mother is crazy, that she unfairly accused me, that you chose a senile old woman over your own wife. No one will respect you after this. I don't care what others will think. I only care about protecting my mother, which I should have done from the beginning." Livia scoffed, grabbed her purse from the dresser, and stormed out of the room. Raphael heard her footsteps descending the stairs, the sound of doors slamming, drawers being opened and closed violently. He stayed there with his mother, holding her, feeling her body tremble with fear and relief at the same time. 15 minutes later, Livia came downstairs with 2 suitcases, her face red with rage. Raphael and Adelaide had also come down and were in the living room. Livia stopped in front of her husband, venom in her eyes. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life, Raphael. I hope you're happy with your mommy dearest, because you just lost the best thing you ever had." She slammed the door so hard that a painting fell from the wall. The sound of her car starting and speeding away echoed through the house. Then, finally, silence. Raphael looked at his mother and saw tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. It was relief. It was liberation. They hugged again, and for the first time in months, Adelaide felt she could breathe without fear. In the following days, Raphael took all necessary measures. He consulted a lawyer about the separation process, gathered evidence of what had happened, and photographed the marks on his mother's arms before they completely disappeared. He also spoke with Marina. The housekeeper arrived on Monday as usual, but was surprised not to find Livia. Raphael called her to talk, and she, nervous, confirmed everything. Yes, it had been her who left the note. She couldn't bear to see Mrs. Adelaide suffering anymore, and didn't know how to help without exposing herself. "You did the right thing," Raphael said. "If it weren't for you, it might have taken me much longer to realize." "Thank you." Marina cried, relieved. She had carried that weight for weeks, afraid of losing her job, afraid of Livia, afraid of everything. Now she could finally breathe easy. Livia didn't return. She sent messages to Raphael trying to negotiate, threatening lawsuits, then begging to talk. He ignored everything. He changed the house's locks, blocked her number, and informed the neighbors and the homeowners association that she was no longer welcome there. The separation was finalized 2 months later. Livia tried to claim alimony, argue that she was entitled to half the assets, but Raphael's lawyer presented all the evidence of what she had done: assault, threats, psychological torture. The judge was clear. She would not be entitled to anything. She left the marriage with only what she had brought into it, and a tarnished reputation that would follow her for a long time. During the final hearing, Livia still tried to justify herself. She said Adelaide provoked her, that it was difficult to live with a mother-in-law in the house, that any woman would understand. But the judge interrupted her, his eyes stern behind his glasses. "Madam, what you lost was not patience, it was humanity. Assaulting an elderly, vulnerable person who depends on your care has no justification. What you did was cowardly and criminal. You will have to answer for it." Livia was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay compensation to Adelaide. She left the courtroom screaming, blaming everyone, but no one was listening anymore. Raphael and Adelaide left through the back door, avoiding commotion, and returned home in silence. The first few days after Livia's departure were strange. The house was silent, but it was a different kind of silence. No longer that heavy, oppressive quiet that preceded storms. It was a silence of peace, of new beginnings, of slow but steady healing. Adelaide woke up in the morning and took a few seconds to remember that she was safe, that Livia was no longer there, that she could leave her room without fear. Raphael had taken 2 weeks off work. He needed to be present, truly present this time. It wasn't enough just to expel Livia and assume everything would go back to normal. The emotional damage his mother had suffered was deep and required care, time, and genuine attention. In the first few mornings, he would go down to the kitchen and find Adelaide already awake, sitting at the table just looking out the window. She didn't eat, didn't turn on the radio, didn't do anything. She just sat and waited, as if still under Livia's rules. "Mom, shall we have coffee together?" Raphael would say, setting the table. "You can eat as much as you want, however you want. There are no more absurd rules here." Adelaide would look at her son as if slowly processing the words. Then she would nod, still hesitant, and eat small portions, testing if it was true, if no one would yell at her, if she could really be at peace. It was Raphael who suggested therapy. One afternoon, after Adelaide had spent hours in her room, doing nothing, he went up and sat beside her on the bed. "Mom, I think it would be good for us to seek professional help. Someone who understands these things, who can help you process everything that happened." Adelaide frowned. "Therapy? That's for crazy people, Raphael. I'm not crazy." "No one said you're crazy, Mum. Therapy isn't just for people with mental problems. It's for people who have gone through difficult situations and need help to move forward. I'm going to do it too." "You? But you didn't suffer anything." "Yes, I did. I suffered for not realizing what was happening. I suffered with the guilt of letting you go through that. Everyone carries their own pains, Mum, and there's no shame in asking for help." Adelaide thought for a long time. She had been raised in a time when talking about feelings was a sign of weakness, where pain was kept hidden and one just moved on. But looking at her son, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she realized that perhaps he was right. Maybe keeping everything inside only made the wounds fester. "All right, I'll try." Raphael scheduled an appointment with Dr. Helen, a psychologist specializing in trauma, who had been recommended by a colleague. The office was in a quiet building in Lodo, with a bright and welcoming waiting room. Adelaide entered nervously, twisting her hands in her lap, looking around as if expecting to be judged. Dr. Helen was a woman of about 50, with brown hair and some grey strands, thin-rimmed glasses, and a gentle smile. She wore simple but elegant clothes, and had a calm voice that immediately put people at ease. "Mrs. Adelaide, welcome. There's no need to be nervous. This is a safe space where you can say whatever you want, at your own pace. There are no judgments, no demands. I'm just here to listen and help." The first few sessions were difficult. Adelaide spoke little, answered in monosyllables, avoided looking into the therapist's eyes. But Helen was patient. She didn't force, didn't pressure. She just created an environment where trust could slowly grow. In the 4th session, something changed. Adelaide began to speak. Slowly at first, then faster, like a dam finally breaking. She told about her short marriage, about her early widowhood, about the years fighting alone to raise her son. She told about the expectations of finally having some rest in old age, about the hope of living with Raphael and being happy. And then she told about Livia. The tears came, strong and painful. Dr. Helen passed the tissue box and let Adelaide cry out everything she had held back for months. When she finally calmed down, the therapist spoke in a gentle voice. "Mrs. Adelaide, what you experienced has a name. It's called domestic violence. And it's not your fault. Nothing you did or didn't do justifies what Livia did. You were a victim, and victims are not to blame." "But I should have told Raphael sooner," Adelaide sobbed. "I should have screamed, defended myself. You were afraid, and fear paralyzes. Livia knew that and used it against you, but now you are safe. Now you can start to rebuild yourself." Those words were like a balm. Adelaide began to understand that silence had not been cowardice but survival, that being afraid didn't make her weak, that asking for help was not shame, but courage. Raphael also began his own therapy with a psychologist named Dr. Mark. His sessions were different, focused on the guilt he carried, the blindness he had towards his wife, the fear of repeating the same mistakes in the future. "I feel like a failure as a son," he confessed in one session. "How could I not see what was happening under my own roof? Because Livia was manipulative and you trusted her. It's not your fault for being deceived, Raphael. But now you have the opportunity to do things differently, to learn, grow, and be the son your mother needs." Raphael left the sessions emotionally exhausted, but also lighter. He was learning that loving was not just about providing materially, but about being present, attentive, willing to see beyond appearances. He was learning that forgiving himself was as important as asking for forgiveness. At home, mother and son began to rebuild their relationship. Raphael reduced his business trips, negotiated a more flexible work schedule with his company. He started working from home a few days a week, being more present at meals, having real conversations with his mother. They returned to old rituals that had been lost. Every afternoon they had coffee together on the porch, eating cake that Adelaide made with her own hands. Raphael had bought a new radio, larger and better than the old one, and placed it in the living room. His mother spent her mornings listening to her favorite songs, the same ones she listened to when he was a child. The sound of the 80s filled the house with good memories, slowly erasing the bad ones. Marina continued working in the house, but now the atmosphere was completely different. She saw Mrs. Adelaide smiling again, humming along with the radio, tending to the garden flowers with care. She saw Dr. Raphael more present, more attentive, more human. One day, as they prepared lunch together, Adelaide took the housekeeper's hand. "Thank you, Marina. It was you who saved my life by leaving that note." Marina felt her eyes well up. "I just did what was right, Mrs. Adelaide. I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer anymore. You were brave. Braver than me." The two women hugged, united by an experience neither of them would have wanted to live, but which had made them stronger in ways they hadn't imagined. As the weeks passed, Adelaide gradually regained her confidence. She started cooking again without fear, experimenting with new recipes, making the dishes she had always loved. Her appetite returned and she began to gain weight, to have color in her face again. The nightmares that tormented her every night became rarer. She still woke up startled sometimes, thinking she heard Livia's voice, but then remembered she was safe and managed to go back to sleep. One afternoon, during a therapy session, Dr. Helen made a suggestion. "Mrs. Adelaide, I think it would be interesting for you to share your story. There are support groups for women who have gone through similar situations. You could help other people and at the same time strengthen your own healing." Adelaide was surprised. "Me? But what could I teach anyone?" "How you could teach that it's possible to survive, that it's possible to rebuild, that speaking is liberating. Your story has power, Mrs. Adelaide. It can inspire other women who are suffering in silence." The idea frightened and at the same time attracted her. Adelaide thought of those months of silence, the loneliness she had felt, the feeling of being completely alone in the world. If someone had told her back then that she wasn't alone, that other women went through the same thing, perhaps she would have found the strength to speak sooner. "I'll think about it," she promised. She talked to Raphael about the idea. He supported it immediately. "I think it's incredible, Mom. You are much stronger than you imagine. And if your story can help even one person, it's worth it." And so, 3 months after Livia's departure, Adelaide agreed to participate in a support group meeting organized by Dr. Helen. It would be next Thursday at a community center in the Baker Historic District. She would have to tell her story to a group of strangers, expose her wounds, relive her pains. The idea terrified her. The night before the meeting, Adelaide barely slept. She mentally rehearsed what she would say, how she would start if she could speak without crying. Raphael noticed his mother's nervousness and sat with her on the porch under the starry Denver sky. "Mom, if you don't want to go, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything you don't feel ready for." "No, I want to go. I need to go, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of not being able to help anyone, of just being another old woman crying about the past." Raphael took his mother's hand and held it tightly. You're not just another anything. You're a survivor. You're someone who went through hell and came out the other side. That has great value, Mum. A lot of value. Adelaide squeezed her son's hand, feeling the strength he had always given her since childhood. He was right. She was a survivor. And maybe it was time to turn that pain into something greater. Thursday arrived sunny, with that typical blue Denver sky that seemed to promise good things. Adelaide woke up early, took a calm shower, chose a simple but beautiful outfit. A light blue dress Raphael had given her weeks ago, saying the color matched her eyes. She looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman she saw. She was no longer that frightened, thin creature with a faded gaze. There was life there again, colors, hope. Raphael made sure to drive her to the community center. The building was on a quiet street, with trees on the sidewalks and children playing in the nearby park. It was a simple place, beige-painted walls, a garden at the entrance with some flowers. Nothing intimidating, nothing scary, just a safe space where stories could be told. Dr. Helen was waiting at the entrance and greeted Adelaide with a warm hug. "I'm very proud of you, Mrs. Adelaide. I know it's not easy to be here, but your courage will inspire many women today." Raphael kissed his mother's forehead before saying goodbye. "I'll be waiting out here. Anything at all, just call me. You can do it, Mom. I believe in you." Adelaide entered the room where the group was already gathered. There were about 15 women, of all ages, all backgrounds, some young, others middle-aged, others already elderly like her, all with the same gaze, one that recognizes in another the pain they have already lived. They sat in a circle, simple plastic chairs, an informal but respectful atmosphere. Dr. Helen made the introductions. Each woman had her story, her reason for being there. Some had suffered violence from husbands, others from children, others from caregivers or family members, but all shared something in common, the silence that almost destroyed them, and the courage to finally speak. It was Adelaide's turn. She stood up, her legs trembling, her hands sweating. She looked at those women and saw in them a reflection of herself. She wasn't alone. She never had been. There were thousands of silenced women hidden behind well-painted walls, suffering in secret. "Good afternoon, my name is Adelaide, and I almost died of silence." The words came out firm, firmer than she imagined she could manage. She started slowly, telling about her young widowhood, about the struggle to raise her son, about the hope of finally resting beside him. Then she told about Livia, about the perfect first days that turned into a nightmare, about the absurd rules, the humiliations, the marks on her arms. "I believed that silence would protect me," she said, her voice choked but firm. "I thought that if I didn't speak, if I didn't complain, things would improve on their own. But silence only imprisoned me more. Fear is not the fault of the one who suffers, it is the fault of the one who makes the other silent." Several women in the room began to cry silently. They recognized those words, that feeling, that guilt they carried for not having spoken sooner. Adelaide continued, telling about the note Marina had left, about the moment Raphael finally saw the marks, about the final confrontation with Livia. "Today I am here, free, rebuilding my life little by little, but I might not be. I could have continued in that hell until I couldn't take it anymore. It took someone speaking for me to find my own voice, and if my story can make one of you find your voice sooner, then it was all worth it." When she finished, the silence in the room was profound. Then one of the younger women, about 30, stood up and began to applaud. Another joined, then another, until all were standing, applauding Adelaide with tears streaming down their faces. It was not just applause for her, but for all of them, for every story of survival, for every woman who chose not to remain silent anymore. After the meeting, several women approached Adelaide. One of them, named Joanna, was a woman of about 65 who had suffered violence from her own son for years. She held Adelaide's hands tightly. "Thank you for speaking. I still live with him. I still suffer. But today, listening to you, I realized I don't have to accept this anymore. I'm going to seek help. I'm going to get out of this situation." Adelaide hugged Joanna and whispered in her ear, "You deserve to be happy. You deserve to live in peace. It's not too late to start over." Another woman, much younger, about 25, also approached. She said she suffered violence from her mother-in-law and a husband who never defended her. She heard daily aggressions, was humiliated in front of others, lived walking on eggshells in her own home. I thought the problem was me, the young woman confessed, that I was too sensitive, too weak. But listening to you, I understood that the problem isn't me. It's the one who hurts me. Adelaide spent almost 2 hours talking with those women, listening, advising, sharing. She realized that by talking about her pain, she was helping others to recognize and face theirs. It was as if every word spoken lit a light in someone who was still in the shadows. When she finally left the community center, Raphael was waiting, leaning against the car, checking his phone. Seeing her, he immediately stood up and went to meet her. He noticed something different. His mother had her head held high, her eyes shining, a half smile on her face. "So, Mom, how was it?" "It was incredible, son. I felt useful for the first time in a long time, as if my pain had found a purpose." On the way back home, Adelaide told Raphael everything, about the women she had met, about the stories she had heard, about the feeling of no longer being alone in her experience. Raphael listened, moved, realizing that his mother had found a way to transform trauma into strength. In the following weeks, Adelaide became a constant presence at the support group meetings. She not only participated, but helped organize, welcomed new women, and shared her story whenever someone needed to hear that it was possible to survive. She became a kind of reference in the group, someone others sought when they needed courage. Dr. Helen suggested that she write her complete story so that it could reach even more women. Adelaide accepted the idea and began writing at night, sitting at the kitchen table, with the radio playing softly in the background. She wrote by hand in a simple notebook, putting on paper every emotion, every moment of fear, every instant of hope. Raphael watched his mother's transformation with immense pride. She had gone from victim to survivor, from survivor to inspiration. The physical marks on her arms had completely disappeared, but the emotional ones were being cared for, treated, transformed into something greater. One afternoon he found his mother in the garden, tending to the roses that had bloomed beautifully that spring. He sat beside her on the grass, admiring her work. "Mum, I need to tell you something." Adelaide dropped the pruning shears and looked at her son, concerned. "What, son? Did something happen?" "No, nothing bad. On the contrary, I met someone." Adelaide's face lit up. "You did? A woman?" Raphael smiled, a little embarrassed. "Yes. Her name is Amanda. She works at the same company as me in the marketing department. We've been talking a lot, gone out a few times. It's different from anything I've ever experienced." Adelaide took her son's hand. "I'm happy for you, Raphael, but I'm also scared. After Livia, how will I know if this girl is good?" Raphael squeezed his mother's hand. "I had that fear too, Mom, but I learned to pay attention to the signs. Amanda is kind, genuine. She doesn't have that false perfection Livia had. And most importantly, I want you to meet her before anything evolves. Your approval is important to me. I will never ignore your instincts again." Tears of gratitude filled Adelaide's eyes. This was the change she valued most, not just her own recovery, but her son's transformation. He had learned, grown, become more attentive, more present, more human. "Then I'd love to meet her. Schedule a dinner here at home. I'll make that cornmeal cake of mine that you love." Raphael laughed and hugged his mother right there in the middle of the blooming garden under the warm November sun. He felt that they were finally well, that the storm had passed and left fertile ground where new and beautiful things could grow. A week later, Amanda came for dinner. She was a 38-year-old woman with curly brown hair, green eyes, and a genuine smile. She had a loud, contagious laugh, spoke enthusiastically about work, but also knew how to listen. She greeted Adelaide with a warm hug and sincerely praised the house's decor, the garden flowers, all without exaggeration or falsity. During dinner, Amanda talked about her own family. Her mother was also a widow and lived alone in Aurora. She visited her every week, helped with groceries, took her out for walks. She spoke of her mother with genuine affection, true respect. Adelaide observed everything, The way Amanda treated Raphael with respect but also with complicity. The way she included her in the conversation, asking sincere questions about her life, her stories. There wasn't that exaggerated sweetness Livia had at the beginning. There was just naturalness, authenticity. At the end of the night, when Amanda said goodbye and Raphael walked her to the car, Adelaide stayed on the porch waiting. When her son returned, she was smiling. "I liked her, Raphael, I really liked her." Raphael hugged his mother, relieved. "Me too, Mom. But I'll take it slow. I won't repeat the mistakes of the past." "You've learned, son, and that's what matters." That night, Adelaide slept peacefully. She dreamed of flowers, of music, of laughter. For the first time in a long time, she dreamed of the future without fear. She knew there would still be challenges, that complete healing would take time, but she also knew she was no longer alone. She had her son, she had the support group, she finally had her own free voice. And that, she discovered, was more powerful than any nightmare from the past. 6 months had passed since Livia left the house. It was March again, and Denver was beginning to feel the crispness of autumn. The leaves on the garden trees were starting to change color, creating a golden and red carpet that Adelaide loved to contemplate from her bedroom window. But unlike when she first arrived at that house, now she contemplated with peace, not with fear. The house had completely changed. Not just physically, although Raphael had done some renovations, painted walls, replaced furniture that brought bad memories. The change was deeper. It was in the air breathed, in the energy circulating through the rooms. It was a happy house now, full of life, music, real conversations. The radio played every morning, old songs that brought Adelaide back to her youth. She sang along as she cooked, preparing recipes she hadn't made in a long time. The cornmeal cake was once again a constant presence at the breakfast table, but now there was also cornbread, scratch-made cheese bread, and tapioca starch cookies. The kitchen was hers again, her territory of love and creativity. Marina still worked in the house, but now the relationship was different. It was no longer just employee and employer, but friends who shared stories, laughter, complicity. They worked together in the kitchen, exchanged recipes, talked about life while tidying the house. Once a month, Adelaide insisted on paying for Marina to go to a salon, saying every woman deserved to take care of herself, to feel beautiful. The support group had become an essential part of Adelaide's life. She never missed the Thursday meetings and often stayed beyond the scheduled time, talking with women who needed a word of encouragement, a sincere hug, someone who understood without judging. Her memory notebook was almost complete, pages and pages written by hand, telling every detail of her journey. Dr. Helen suggested she turn those writings into a small book that could be distributed free of charge in support centers, health clinics, places where vulnerable women could find it. Adelaide was honored, but also scared by the idea. "Do you really think my story can help so many people?" she asked during a therapy session. "I'm sure, Mrs. Adelaide. Your story is powerful because it's real, because it's human, because it shows that it's possible to rebuild. That's exactly what women in situations of violence need to hear, that there is hope, that there is a way out, that there is life after the nightmare." Raphael helped his mother type the manuscript on the computer, transforming those handwritten pages into a digital file. As he typed, he often had to stop to wipe away tears. Reading everything in an organized, sequential way made the dimension of his mother's suffering even clearer. But he also saw her strength there, her resilience, her ability to rise from the ashes. "Mum, you are incredible," he said one night, after finishing typing a particularly painful chapter. "I don't know how you managed to survive all this." "I survived because I had you," Adelaide replied, taking her son's hand. "Because even in the darkest moments I knew you loved me. That love was my anchor. But I should have realized sooner. I should have protected you. You were being manipulated, Raphael. Livia was very good at it. The important thing is that when you realized, you acted. You didn't sit on the fence. You didn't try to justify the unjustifiable. You chose me, and that changed everything." Raphael hugged his mother right there in front of the computer, feeling immense gratitude for still having her, for her having survived, for having the chance to rebuild everything together. The relationship with Amanda was flourishing. They went out regularly, but always included Adelaide in some outings. They went to City Park together, walked around Sloane's Lake, visited the Central Market Hall where Adelaide bought spices, and told stories of the time she frequented the place with her husband decades ago. Amanda had become a constant presence in the house, but always respectful, always attentive to boundaries. She never tried to change anything, never criticized the way Adelaide did things, never made her feel like an intruder in her own space. On the contrary, she asked for recipes, praised the decor, listened to the old stories with genuine interest. One afternoon, while having coffee on the porch, Amanda delicately brought up the subject. "Mrs. Adelaide, Raphael told me about the book you're writing. I think it's incredible. If you need help with editing, layout, anything, I know some people in marketing who can help." Adelaide was touched. "That would be very good, my dear. I really don't understand anything about these modern computer things." "Then it's a deal. We'll make this a beautiful project that will reach many women who need it." It was the first time Adelaide called Amanda my dear daughter. The word came out naturally, without fear, without reservations. And Amanda, realizing the significance of it, smiled with tearful eyes. 3 months later, the book was ready. A small volume of 100 pages, a simple but beautiful cover with the title Adelaide had chosen, "I Am Alive, Memories of a Survivor." Amanda found a printing company that printed 500 copies as a donation. Dr. Helen organized the launch at an event at the community center, inviting health professionals, social workers, members of support groups. The launch day was emotional. The room was packed, over 100 people present. Adelaide, who months ago could barely speak in front of 15 women, now stood on a small makeshift stage to talk about her book. Raphael was in the first row, Amanda by his side, both with eyes shining with pride. "This book is for every woman who has ever been afraid to speak," Adelaide began, her firm voice echoing through the room. "For every woman who believed that silence would protect her. I learned the most painful way that silence does not protect. It imprisons. That shame should not be on the one who suffers, but on the one who causes the suffering. And that it is never, ever too late to start over." The applause was deafening. People stood up, some crying, others smiling, all touched by those words. Adelaide distributed the first copies with her own hands, hugging each woman who approached, listening to their stories, offering encouragement. An 80-year-old woman took the book with trembling hands and said softly, "I suffered in silence for 40 years. I thought my story didn't matter. But seeing you here so brave, I realize that every story matters." "Yes, it does," Adelaide replied, hugging her. "And it's never too late to tell. It's never too late to be free." That night back home, the family gathered in the living room. Raphael, Adelaide, Amanda, and even Marina, who had been invited to celebrate. They toasted with grape juice because Adelaide didn't like alcoholic beverages, and talked late into the night about the success of the event, about the women who had been touched, about future plans. "You know what I'd like to do," Adelaide suddenly said, looking at everyone. "I'd like to visit schools, talk to young people about healthy relationships, about warning, signs about how not to be silent when something is wrong. Prevention is better than cure." Raphael smiled. "We'll make that happen, Mum. I'll talk to some schools, see how we can organize it." And that's what they did. In the following months, Adelaide became a speaker in public and private schools in Denver. She spoke to teenagers about respect, about the first signs of abusive relationships, about the importance of having a voice. She often brought other women from the support group, transforming the talks into powerful moments of exchange and learning. The impact was immense. Teachers reported students who, after the talks, sought help for situations they were experiencing. Principals expressed gratitude, saying that this prevention work was essential. Adelaide received letters from teenagers telling how her words had helped, how they had found the courage to speak, to ask for help, to leave toxic situations. A year after Livia left, Raphael and Amanda got engaged. The proposal was simple, at home, during a family dinner. Raphael knelt in front of Amanda with a ring in his hand and asked if she wanted to build a life with him. Before she answered, he looked at his mother. "But only if you approve, Mum. Your opinion matters most to me." Adelaide was crying, but they were tears of pure happiness. "I approve, son. I approve with all my heart. Amanda is a wonderful woman, and you will be very happy." Amanda said yes, crying too, and the three hugged right there in the kitchen that had been the scene of so much pain, but was now only love. The wedding was scheduled for 6 months later, a simple ceremony in the house garden, just for close family and intimate friends. Adelaide made a point of helping with all the preparations, cooking sweets, arranging flowers, giving opinions on the decoration. She felt useful, loved, an essential part of that new beginning. On the morning of the wedding, as she arranged the last flowers in the garden, Adelaide stopped and looked around. The house was beautiful, decorated with white ribbons and colourful flowers. The sky was blue, without a cloud. Birds sang in the trees. It was a perfect day to celebrate love, new beginnings, life. She thought of everything she had gone through to get there, the pain, the fear, the silence that almost destroyed her. But she also thought of the strength she discovered she had, the voice she finally found, the lives she was helping to transform. The physical wounds had healed, leaving marks that were now symbols of survival, not shame. The radio in the living room played an old song, one she adored. Without thinking, she began to hum along, then to sing louder, letting her voice spread through the garden. Marina, who was passing by with a tray, stopped and smiled. "You're happy today, Mrs. Adelaide." "I am, Marina. I am very happy. I am alive, and that, I discovered, is the greatest gift anyone can have." The ceremony was moving. Raphael and Amanda exchanged vows under an arch of flowers that Adelaide had helped assemble. When the justice of the peace declared them husband and wife, everyone applauded, and Adelaide shed tears of joy. Her son was happy, truly happy, with a woman who truly loved him and respected his family. During the party, Adelaide danced, ate, laughed, hugged every guest. She felt alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. Dr. Helen was there, as were several women from the support group. All celebrated not only Raphael and Amanda's wedding, but Adelaide's victory, her journey from victim to survivor to inspiration. At the end of the night, when the guests had left and the house was silent, Adelaide went out to the porch. The sky was starry, the full moon illuminating the garden. She sat in the rocking chair Raphael had specially installed for her and rocked slowly, letting the cool breeze touch her face. Raphael came to join her, Amanda on his arm. They sat on the porch floor, leaning against the wall, just enjoying the quiet night. "Thank you for everything, Mum," Raphael said, "for being strong, for surviving, for being here today." "Thank you, both of you," Adelaide replied, "for giving me reasons to continue, for teaching me that it's never too late to start over." The three stayed there for a long time, in silence, just appreciating that moment of complete peace. The garden that had once witnessed so much suffering was now a sanctuary of hope. The house that had been a prison was now a true home. Adelaide looked at the stars and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for having a voice, for having love. Gratitude for having transformed the deepest pain into a greater purpose. Gratitude for having learned that forgiveness is not forgetting, but choosing not to let the past control the present. The radio in the living room still played softly that old song she loved so much. She closed her eyes and let the melody envelop her. She was at peace. She was safe. She was finally home. And in that moment, under the starry sky of Denver, surrounded by the people she loved, Adelaide understood the deepest truth she had learned throughout that journey. The phrase that was once a desperate plea now echoed as an absolute victory. "I am alive." And that life, she discovered, was worth every battle fought to reclaim it. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Mrs. Adelaide, Raphael, and the overcoming they experienced has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative teaches us that silence never protects, it only imprisons, and that it is never too late to find our voice and rebuild our lives. To continue this emotional journey with us, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the strength of the human spirit. You can find it by clicking here. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that celebrate the courage, resilience, and ability to start over that exists in each of us. Share your reflections in the comments. Tell us if you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Together we can help more people find their voice and transform their pain into strength. Until the next story, and remember, you are never alone on your journey.